The hearing room in Washington was never meant to feel like a courtroom drama, but on this day, tension thickened the air as if history itself was about to shift. Senators sat rigid behind polished desks, cameras lined every wall, and reporters crowded the back, sensing something different was about to happen. This wasn't another political performance. This wasn't scripted outrage for sound bites. This was a rare moment where power was about to be questioned directly and publicly. Senator John Kennedy slowly leaned into his microphone, his voice calm but sharp, the way it gets when someone is about to cross a line others are too afraid to approach. Across from him sat Kash Patel, a former high-level national security official who had seen the inside of intelligence operations most Americans only hear about in headlines. Patel had testified for hours already, carefully choosing his words, navigating questions about classified matters, investigations, and government oversight. Then, Kennedy dropped the question that froze the room. He asked Patel, plainly, without political cushioning, whether President Trump had ordered the Epstein files buried. Not delayed, not reviewed, buried. For a moment, the only sound was the soft clicking of cameras. Senators shifted in their seats. Journalists stopped typing. Millions watching at home leaned closer to their screens. Everyone understood what had just been put on the table. The Epstein case wasn't just another scandal. It was the most sensitive corruption network the country had ever encountered. A web of power, money, and influence that stretched across politics, corporations, media, and global elites. Jeffrey Epstein had not been a normal criminal. He had been a man with private islands, unexplained wealth, elite friendships, and access to the world's most powerful people. He had hosted politicians, billionaires, royalty, intelligence figures, and celebrities, all while running a trafficking operation that preyed on vulnerable girls. When he was arrested, many believed the truth was finally coming out, but it never did. Instead, evidence disappeared. Witnesses were silenced. Court records were sealed. Surveillance footage mysteriously malfunctioned. And Epstein himself was found dead in a federal jail under circumstances that raised more questions than answers. For years, Americans asked the same thing. Who was being protected? Kennedy's question brought that suspicion into official record. Patel didn't laugh it off. He didn't dismiss it as conspiracy. Instead, his face tightened, the look of someone weighing how much truth he could reveal without crossing classified boundaries. He acknowledged that throughout the Epstein investigation, unusual levels of interference had occurred. According to Patel, multiple agencies were instructed to restrict access to sensitive materials, citing national security risks. That phrase alone changed everything. National security is the government's strongest shield. It's the mechanism used when exposure threatens powerful interests. Once a case is labeled sensitive, documents vanish behind secrecy walls that can last decades. Kennedy pressed him further. He asked whether political pressure from the executive branch had halted key investigative steps. He referenced internal communications showing subpoenas delayed without explanation, digital evidence flagged as restricted, and financial trails abruptly closed. Patel admitted that directives had not come from frontline investigators. They had come from executive-level authority. The room erupted in whispers. That wasn't denial. That was confirmation without naming names. In Washington language, it meant the highest levels of government were involved. The Epstein case had not simply stalled, it had been stopped. Legal analysts later explained what this implied. When investigations reach individuals with immense financial or political influence, the system often shifts into containment mode, not justice mode. Containment protects institutions, reputations, and stability, even if it sacrifices truth. Kennedy continued laying out what whistleblowers had quietly told congressional investigators over the years. According to those insiders, Epstein wasn't operating alone. He was part of a blackmail operation that collected compromising material on powerful figures. That material could then be used to influence votes, policies, business deals, and legal outcomes. Sex trafficking, they said, was only the surface crime. The deeper operation was leverage. Former intelligence officers soon backed this theory publicly, explaining that such operations have existed throughout history. Powerful people are lured into illegal acts, secretly recorded or documented, then controlled indefinitely. Epstein's wealth, protection, and connections suddenly made sense. He wasn't just rich, he was useful. Kennedy revealed that sealed court filings referenced complex financial transactions between shell corporations linked to Epstein and entities tied to major political donors, global banking institutions, and organizations with direct government connections. These weren't small transfers. They were multi-million-dollar movements designed to disappear across borders, routed through offshore accounts, nonprofit fronts, and legal settlement structures that made the money nearly impossible to trace. Investigators who tried to follow those trails later testified that the moment certain names appeared, pressure arrived. Supervisors ordered reviews paused. Digital access was restricted. Audit teams were reassigned. Every time the investigation moved closer to exposure, the system slowed itself down. Warrants that should have taken hours took months. Witness lists were quietly shortened. Key testimony was labeled sensitive. Financial records were suddenly classified, not for protection, for containment. Until eventually, the entire investigation collapsed into silence. And then, Epstein was dead. A death ruled a suicide, despite broken cameras, sleeping guards, and procedures that failed simultaneously in ways experts later called nearly impossible to occur naturally. For many Americans, the conclusion was chilling. The justice system hadn't failed, it had been overridden. Someone, somewhere, had decided that truth was more dangerous than injustice. Within minutes of the hearing, public reaction exploded. Social media platforms flooded with calls to unseal every Epstein-related document. Millions demanded to know who had been protected for so long. Victims' advocacy groups organized emergency press conferences, pleading for independent prosecutors free from political influence. Journalists reopened old timelines that suddenly made perfect sense. Every delay, every disappearance of evidence, every unexplained decision now fit a pattern. Even lawmakers from both parties quietly admitted what many had whispered for years. This case had been handled differently from the start, handled carefully, handled quietly, handled to protect someone, or many someones. Kennedy closed his questioning with a statement that cut through the political noise like a blade. He said, "A nation cannot call itself free when justice operates selectively, when the law punishes the weak but shields the powerful, when evidence is buried instead of examined, when secrecy replaces accountability. If the Epstein files were buried," he warned, "then democracy itself had been compromised. Because governments that hide truth are not defending citizens, they are defending power." As the hearing ended and officials exited the room, one reality became impossible to ignore. Epstein was never just a criminal scandal. He was a doorway into how influence truly operates behind closed doors. A glimpse into a system where money purchases silence, where leverage controls outcomes, where secrets become currency. Experts later explained that blackmail networks are among the oldest tools of political control, collecting compromising information on powerful individuals to ensure loyalty, obedience, and long-term influence. Once trapped, those individuals become assets within the system. Epstein, many now believed, was not acting alone. He was a node in a larger operation. And when that operation risked exposure, the machinery of power moved swiftly to shut it down. The files remained sealed. The names remained hidden. The financial networks remained only partially exposed. But something had fundamentally changed. The silence was gone. For the first time, the questions were being asked in public, on record, under oath. And history shows that once secrets enter public conversation, they rarely stay buried forever. Because truth does not disappear. It waits. It surfaces. And when it finally rises, it has the power to shake entire systems, no matter how deep it was pushed.